Tonight we are talking about clinical trials. We're going to talk about the benefits of clinical trials. We're going to talk about some of the myths. Participants are not guinea pigs. And we're going to talk about ways that you can find out more information if you think that this is something that you would be interested in as part of your cancer journey. Are you ready? Let's do it. So welcome everyone to Cancer Center Live. I'm Allison Johnson, Manager of Communications at Windsor Regional Hospital. We're live tonight in the Windsor Regional Cancer Center, and I want to introduce you to my guest this evening. We have Julie, and Julie was diagnosed with cancer and had to make some pretty quick decisions and eventually ended up as a participant in a clinical trial. Welcome.
Thank you.
And then we have Krista. Krista is a program manager in with the clinical trials. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
So let's start with you, Julie. Maybe tell us a bit about your journey. How did it start?
Well, everything started, I would say, last January. I was diagnosed with tonsil cancer after I had a tonsillectomy, and pretty much overnight had to decide if I was going to be part of a clinical trial. So that was a big decision to make.
Mm-hmm. And spoiler alert, she did make that decision. And Krista, maybe you can tell us a bit about your role here.
Sure. In the cancer program, I'm part of the clinical trials department, and we not only help physicians identify patients who may be eligible for a clinical trial, we also help those patients through their decision process and through the actual trial process itself.
Great. And I want to welcome all of you into the conversation right now. If you haven't joined us before, Cancer Center Live is an interactive, audience-driven discussion. So we've got a great topic tonight. I'm sure you have lots of questions. Please post them, and we will answer them throughout this discussion tonight. And as a bonus, not that you needed one, but anyone who posts tonight will be entered into a draw for a chance to win $25 Starbucks gift certificates. So please post away, and we'll get started here. And I'm going to ask the first question to Krista. Very simple question. What is a clinical trial?
It's a good question, you're right. So a clinical trial is really a process through which a new treatment, whether it's a medication or a way to deliver a treatment or a new medical device perhaps, it's a way to test and see what the side effects are, if this treatment's effective, and different ways that it can be used.
And we started off talking about a myth. So when you talk about that, what is the myth? Where does that come from about being a guinea pig or a lab rat in a trial like this?
I think in the past or historically there was probably a time where research has been done in a way that wasn't necessarily to the standards that we hold today. So that could be a historical thing, but nowadays there are definitely many layers and levels of protection for both the participants and of course the outcomes and the science behind it.
And I think we'll get a little bit deeper into some of that later in this discussion, and if you have any questions about that or any other myths that you might have heard, please post them here. Julie, I want to ask you, so how did you make that decision? You said it had to be quick. Maybe tell me a little bit about that experience.
Well, you are given information, and so, I read through the 10, 20 pages that I was given.
But how soon after were you given that information to the diagnosis? So you told you have tonsil cancer.
Right. I would say it took 2 weeks to come into the cancer center. But once I met with my oncologist, it was very fast. He realized that I could be part of the clinical trial and asked if I was interested, which I was. And so then I had to, do all of the reading and think about it. The problem with mine was that the trial was actually closing the next day at 5. So not only did I have to decide, but I had to decide and be sent for all of the pre-op tests that I had to do. And there was quite a few, from hearing tests to CAT scans. It was fast.
And what did that mean for you then, to make that decision? How is your treatment then going to be different than if you had opted not to be part of this trial?
If I hadn't been part of the trial, I would have been given chemotherapy and radiation both. But with the trial, I had 2 arms, and it was a roll of the dice as to what arm I was going to get. And for one arm, it was lower doses of radiation and chemo, and the other arm was lower doses of radiation. And so I thought, really, it's a win-win for me, and I will definitely be happy with the outcome regardless. What was really important for me was I had a good friend who works in the medical field, and I called her and I said, okay, I don't know anything about clinical trials. And she said, listen, if they're offering you a clinical trial, take it for sure. And the doctors wouldn't offer it to you if they felt that it wasn't going to cure you as well. So everything had to be the most positive outcome.
Win-win.
Win-win.
So yeah, Krista, let's talk a little bit about that. What are the rules in terms of when can you invite people to be part of a trial?
That's a really good question. And so there are clinical trials out there. Unfortunately, at every center, there may not be a trial for every patient, but definitely if a trial is available, your oncologist will do everything they can to get you enrolled into that trial. Now, if there is a trial available for the type of cancer that you have, then there are what they call eligibility criteria that patients have to meet. And the main purpose of those criteria are not only to make sure that, of course, the question that they're trying to answer gets answered at the end of the trial, but also to protect the patient and make sure that the trial treatment isn't going to be unsafe or harmful any more than what's already needed to the patient. So they're really important, those criteria.
And are there rules about the level of risk?
Yes, so all clinical trials in Canada are reviewed by Health Canada, of course, and given a green light if they're going to be offered to patients. And then another level of that risk kind of review is ethics boards. There's a research ethics board in charge of every cancer center, and they review the risk level and also give approval to make sure it's not more than the required risk to answer the question for patients.
So if you are part of one of the trials, you can feel comfortable knowing that there's not any unnecessary risk being taken.
Right, exactly.
Is that something that you considered? I know you said that you had a friend who was helpful in kind of relieving any questions that, concerns that you had, but did you feel that you might be?
It was a very scary time, and I guess having 3 children, I just wanted to make sure I had the most positive outcome. And so for me, if I was going to be given just radiation, would I still be as okay as if I had been given chemo and radiation? So that really was the biggest factor for me. Mm-hmm. And to know that the doctors couldn't offer it if they felt that chemo and radiation would do a better job.
Right. So you felt comfortable.
So I once, as I said, my friend explained that to me, I felt very comfortable saying, yes, please, can I be part of the clinical trial?
And how long ago was it? Are you still part of the trial?
It's ongoing. I believe it might be for life, actually. So my treatment actually ended at the end of March last year, and I have had many follow-ups. You're really they take excellent care of you regardless, but I feel that through the trial, they take extra care of you because there's certain guidelines that they have to meet.
They're interested in what's going on, right?
Absolutely.
Because you don't do clinical trials for no reason. Let's talk about the benefits. What is this information used for?
So, like we mentioned, the purpose, let's give an example for a drug treatment. The purpose is to find out if that treatment works, if it's safe, and again, how it's to be used for patients. So, the pathway for that is like you said, quite rigorous, and the benefits at the end of the day are we have treatments that we know are effective, we know are safe, and that doctors can prescribe for their patients. Also, in general, anytime a scientific question's asked, at the end of the day, we're moving forward in our knowledge, and there's still a lot, of course, that we don't know, but every time a patient, takes that risk on and participates in a clinical trial, it moves that forward.
Nice. And I want to bring Janet into the conversation. She left a comment. She said, very interesting topic. Thanks for sharing. Thank you, Janet, for sharing that. And please, if this is something that you're interested in, if you think others might be interested in, please share. And if you have any questions, please ask. We're here for the next little while talking about clinical trials. I still have a lot more questions, though, so if you're not ready yet, don't feel any pressure. Krista, I want to know, how does this start? How do you approach somebody and ask them, And is it all local? Are the trials local?
I'll answer the first part of your question, if that's, and how does a patient participate in a trial? So as I mentioned, there's certain trials open at different cancer centers, and that's really driven by our physicians and also our patient demographics, our patient population. So if we have a clinical trial that's available for a patient, we actually review patients ahead of time and help the physicians identify potential patients. If there's a trial that you may be eligible for, your oncologist will approach you if they feel it's appropriate for the timing of your treatment and all you know, make sure that everything's appropriate to participate. And then at that point, it really becomes the patient, you know, are they interested in hearing more? Do they want, is this something that they would like to do? And that process starts there. The second part of your question, now I already forgot it.
Is it all local? Is the research being done locally?
So we actually have a number of trials that are local, and we're very lucky to have collaboration with the University of Windsor and to be able to bring local research to our patients. So that's really exciting. We also, though, have a number of international or multi-center trials, they're called, and where we are one site out of many sites, and these are often run by not always a drug company. You know, you hear about pharma and drug companies, and that might seem a little scary, but a lot of the trials we do are also academic trials and run by, like, for example, the Canadian Cooperative Group, the Canadian Clinical Trials Group out of Kingston and out of Queen's University. So that's a really big academic group. Really, they have a lot of great research questions that we participate in those trials.
How did it feel to be part of that research, the ongoing look at how to make things better for other people? That's really interesting, a different opportunity, I guess.
That really did attract me as making a decision to be part of the trial, because I felt like I could be making a difference. So I was going to be going through radiation or chemo regardless, but if I could in the end be helping somebody else out later, the thought for my particular cancer was it didn't need to have chemo and radiation at the same time to be successful. In which case then, if they find that out through science and through this study, then, you know, future individuals who have this cancer will not have to have the chemo at all. And I thought that was really wonderful.
That would be a huge difference if that. And what about the results? Do you get to know the results, and are you updated on that?
I do. I'm not sure when. As I said, the trial closed the day I signed, and I think they look at 3 and 5 year increments. You know, what percentage is still alive after 5 years, and that type of thing. And it was a really, really high number anyway for my type of cancer. So I do get told, though, the results.
Okay. And have you ever had patients here who have had really good results or been part of research? Do you have any examples of a clinical trial that's led to big change?
Yeah, so we actually, if we think way back to 2002, we were part of a groundbreaking trial called the HERA trial, and that was when Herceptin was a new drug. Now it's if you have been through any sort of journey in breast cancer, you may have heard of the drug Herceptin, but at the time it was an investigational new drug, and we were part of a clinical trial that they actually stopped early because it was found to be so effective, this treatment, and then Health Canada approved it, and now it's the standard of care for patients with a certain type of breast cancer. So that was really
that's
amazing.
huge. That would be different, quite an opportunity to be part of that. Now, on the flip side, what if during the trial it is discovered that it's not doing what researchers had hoped?
Absolutely. So, as we've said, these are scientific questions. So if we're asking the question, we don't necessarily know the answer, and that's the point of the trial, is to find out what the answer is. So if throughout a trial, there's always safety analyses that are being done, even while patients are still enrolling or being treated, and that's of course number one is safety, and also to see if the treatment's effective. And if at any point their analysis finds that that's not the case, they will stop a trial early, and then patients would move along to a standard treatment or whatever's best for them in their journey.
Okay. What about for the patients? Do they have the option to opt out?
And I'm sure Julie has heard us in our department say this to her many times, but anytime a patient signs up for a clinical trial, they have the right to withdraw at any time for any reason. So by signing that form to sign up for a trial doesn't mean that you're
not
locked
signing
in.
everything
No.
away. No, it's pretty open. And was that a big part of your decision? Knowing that you could get out if you wanted to. Say, I would like to have that chemo.
No, I don't think that was part of my decision. I pretty much was sold on it, and I understood too. For a very long time, I would be coming back every year for a CAT scan and you know, doing yearly blood tests and that type of thing. So
Yeah.
I felt pretty comfortable with it, actually.
Good, yeah, no, that's important for sure. We have a comment from Karen. Karen, thanks for joining us. And she says, if there's a clinical trial that's offered at a different center, are they open to someone here? And I think that we did touch on that. Maybe you can expand on it, but also maybe what's the relationship like with that center?
No, that's a great question. And so we definitely, especially for patients who have heard about a clinical trial and maybe the treatment options for them, they'd like to explore other treatment options, our physicians are always ready and open to exploring clinical trials at other centers, because as I mentioned, we don't have a trial for every patient here, but there are trials out there. So any patient who's motivated to travel to another center for a clinical trial, we can investigate that avenue. There would be, as I mentioned, possibly some travel involved and treatments at other centers, but you know, we can make it happen if a patient's interested. So our physicians are in touch with that, and there are open lines of communication with other cancer centers.
Nice. And I mean, travel isn't something that everyone could do, and is that something that you would incur the cost yourself then?
Yes, if patients needed to travel for that treatment, but there are a number of different programs in different areas where possibly there'd be some help for patients if they needed to stay somewhere long term.
Okay. And we have another question here, a question from Karen. She says, should you always look for a clinical trial, or are there situations where you don't want to look for one? That's a great question.
It is a good question, and it could be that, for example, the standard treatments that the physicians are offering are, you know, the treatments themselves are gold standard. There may not be a lot of new or innovative research in an area because, you know, the treatments we have they've kind of reached a point where it's very effective or that sort of thing. So an area where maybe, as I mentioned, you would need to travel is if there's a type of cancer that's more rare. We probably wouldn't have a trial for that here, and you may need to investigate, but you know, or as I said, if there isn't a lot of new discoveries in an area of cancer, it could be because there's been a lot of recent innovations in treatment, and so the standard of care would be the best thing for you.
So if you're just joining us, we're talking about clinical trials in the Cancer Center tonight. We have Krista, who is a program coordinator with clinical trials, and we have Julie, who was a participant and still is a participant in a clinical trial. So if you have any questions, post away. How many people are currently going through them? Do you have that number or percentage of people who go through clinical trials?
Yeah, so and really, like nationally, there is a percentage, and it's actually, it sounds quite small. It's usually around 3 to 5% of patients that actually enroll and get into a clinical trial. And if we think about even our numbers here at the Cancer Center, we probably enroll around 80 to 100 patients a year to a clinical trial. And so with, you know, and it is a smaller percentage. Now I know there's a lot of movement to increase that number. We want to increase that number too, because it just drives research forward the more things we can offer our patients. And that's something that Windsor Regional Hospital Cancer Program, I know, is committed to working towards as well.
Great. Julie, when people found out that you were in a clinical trial, or is it something that you talked about a lot when you were talking about your journey?
I was pretty open with everything that was happening. The idea that I was in a clinical trial came up sometimes, but I can't say that I had a lot of conversations about it.
Do people have a lot of questions though? Because it is something different, and maybe questions about the risk or perceived risk.
Really, it was questions about, you know, the arms and how the treatment was different in the clinical trial, as opposed to what I would have had with the standard care.
What's been the most interesting part for you? Well,
I guess it took quite a few months to be able to eat again.
The whole journey.
That was something else, yes.
Was that because of you had more radiation than if you would have gone the chemo route? Would that have been different, do you know?
I don't believe I had more radiation, no.
Oh, okay.
No, I did have a little bit of a different experience with radiation, in that typically you go once a day for 5 days and you have 30 treatments. I went, once a day for 25 days, 5 days a week. And I went twice a day on one day. And so that was very different. They were just trying to be very careful and catch cancer in any stage of the cell growth, is how it was explained to me. So, yes.
Krista, if people out there watching tonight wanted to have more information, somebody sitting there considering it, where can they get more information on this?
So if you're interested to find out, if you're a patient of the Cancer Center, of course, please talk to your oncologist, your doctor. They would have the most knowledge for what's appropriate for you. But if you're interested in finding out what we have to offer here at the Cancer Program, the Windsor Regional Hospital Cancer Program site has our currently open and enrolling clinical trials. Also, there's a great website for general clinical trial information. It's called itstartswithme.ca. And this has been put together through a national initiative to try and promote education and awareness about clinical trials. And it's really patient and public focused, and it has a lot of great information.
Great, and I will post those links after right underneath, so anyone who wants more information can get those. I have two comments here, one for Julie. To Julie, thank you for sharing your story. You are a very brave person. Thank you for sharing that. And for Krista, thank you for sharing your expertise. Absolutely.
Oh, wow. Thanks.
So I just have one more question here, and while I'm asking it, if you have any more questions, post them. But question for both of you, is there anything I missed? Anything that you think is important to talk about when we're talking about clinical trials, the process, the experience that we can share with people who are participating with us at home? When you want to start?
Sure. For me, just don't be afraid to ask if there is a clinical trial. Go ahead with it. I think it's a really positive experience, and you can only help research, you can only help cancer in the end. So go for it.
Excellent. And Krista?
I think the biggest message for a patient, if you are in the discussion of a clinical trial, is to just remember that you have rights to ask questions, you can withdraw at any time, and of course that this is a very personal decision. So there are patients who would rather not participate in a clinical trial, and it's a decision that only a patient can make for themselves. I think the most important thing is that patients make an informed decision. So having all the information in front of you, making sure that you ask questions about risks and possible benefits and that sort of thing. So making an informed decision is the best decision.
Great. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for sharing this information. Thank you all for joining us tonight. Cancer Center Live is live in the Cancer Center on the third Wednesday of every month, so hopefully you'll join us again. If you have any more questions, you can continue to post them here, and we'll try and get you answers as soon as possible. And that's it for us tonight. Thank you very much. Have a good night. Bye-bye.
Bye.